When I first moved into this neighborhood, I thought I had finally found peace. The kind of peace you dream of after years of chaos, broken leases, and loud city nights. The streets here were quiet, lined with oak trees that whispered in the wind. The lawns were perfectly trimmed, mailboxes gleamed in the sun, and every neighbor smiled when you passed by. It felt safe. But peace has a funny way of turning into something else when people decide it's not meant for you. It started on a Monday morning. I remember because I was sipping coffee on my porch when I noticed my neighbor, Janet, standing across the street with a clipboard. She wasn't looking at her own house, she was staring directly at mine. She stood there for several minutes, her expression cold, her eyes calculating, before she finally turned away. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was part of the HOA committee, maybe she was just inspecting something. But then, later that day, I saw her again, this time walking along my driveway with her phone out taking pictures. I stepped outside. "Hey, can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound polite. She looked startled for a moment, then composed herself. "Oh, I'm just documenting something for the association," she said. "The association?" "Yes, the HOA." That word made my stomach twist. I'd heard about HOA nightmares before, but I thought I was lucky. My realtor had told me this one was mild, just a few basic rules, nothing too crazy. Still, something in her tone made me uneasy. The next day, I got a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't a bill or a flyer, it was an official-looking envelope from the HOA. Inside, a single-page read. "Notice of property discrepancy. Please contact HOA immediately regarding verification of ownership." At first I laughed. A mistake, obviously. I just bought this house 6 months ago. My name was on the deed. I had the documents, the keys, everything. But when I called the number listed, the woman on the other end sounded cold and distant. "Ah yes, Mr. Thompson," she said. "We've received a claim from one of our members that your property may have been incorrectly recorded in our database." "What? That's ridiculous," I said. "Who made that claim?" "I'm not authorized to share that information at this time," she replied. "But we'll need you to bring proof of ownership to our office this Friday for verification." That Friday, I showed up with a folder full of documents, title deed, mortgage statements, even a copy of the closing contract. The HOA office was inside a community clubhouse that smelled like bleach and coffee. Behind the desk sat 3 people, all wearing the same expression, blank professionalism. I spread the papers in front of them. "Here," I said, "everything's in order." The man in the middle, a balding guy named Richard, adjusted his glasses and glanced through the papers. "Yes, these appear legitimate," he said slowly. "However, there's a conflicting record submitted by another homeowner claiming this address belongs to them." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He looked up at me, dead serious. "The claim includes older property maps dated prior to your purchase. Until we can verify, we're required by association policy to suspend your membership privileges." "Membership privileges?" I repeated. "I don't care about the privileges, I care about my house." "Sir, please lower your voice," said the woman beside him. I stared at them, feeling my pulse pounding in my neck. "Who made this claim?" Richard sighed. "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but since it directly involves your property, it's Mrs. Janet Holloway, your neighbor to the north." I froze. Janet, the woman with the clipboard. When I got home, she was in her yard, watering her roses. I walked over, trying to keep calm. "Janet, can I ask why you told the HOA that my house was yours?" She didn't even flinch. "Because it is," she said simply. I laughed in disbelief. "Excuse me." "This house," she continued, gesturing toward it, "was built on the wrong plot of land. My property line extends 20 feet further than the map your realtor gave you. Technically, half of your home sits on my lot." "That's insane," I said. "You can't just claim that." Her expression remained calm, too calm. "I've lived here for 30 years, Mr. Thompson. I know where my land ends. I've filed a request with the HOA to correct the records." And with that, she turned and went back inside, leaving me standing there speechless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring out the window at her house. Her lights were still on, glowing through the blinds like 2 unblinking eyes. Over the next few days, things got worse. I started receiving notices, first about boundary violations, then about unauthorized structures. Apparently, according to the HOA, my backyard shed and even part of my fence were encroaching on Janet's property. I called them again, furious. You can't just take her word for it. We're conducting an independent survey, they told me. Until then, please refrain from making any modifications or repairs on the disputed areas. A survey sounded fair, at least until I saw who they hired. The man showed up in Janet's driveway first, laughing and chatting with her before even walking onto my side. He spent less than 10 minutes looking at my yard before packing up and leaving. 2 days later, the HOA's decision arrived. After review of submitted documentation, Mrs. Holloway's property boundaries appear valid. The structure located at 1183 Oak Ridge Lane, your home, may partially occupy her lot. I felt sick. I went to the county office myself, determined to clear this up. There, a tired clerk pulled up the maps and deeds on her computer. No, she said, your deed is correct, there's no overlap. Whoever filed the claim must be using outdated survey maps. Can you give me a certified copy? I asked. She printed everything: maps, signatures, seals. I rushed home, slammed the packet onto my desk, and emailed every page to the HOA. 2 days passed, no response. Then, on the third day, a letter arrived, this time hand-delivered. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from Janet's lawyer. The letter claimed I was willfully occupying private property belonging to Mrs. Holloway and demanded I cease usage of all portions of the disputed land until further legal resolution. I couldn't believe it, my hands were shaking as I read it. I tried calling the HOA again, but this time they refused to speak on the phone. All communication must go through written channels, they said in a generic email. I was starting to realize I wasn't just up against one crazy neighbor, I was up against a system that believed her. A week later, things escalated again. One evening, as I was coming home from work, I noticed a new sign staked into the ground near my fence: property under dispute, do not enter. It had the HOA's logo at the bottom. I stormed to Janet's door and knocked. What are you trying to pull? I demanded. She smiled faintly. It's just procedure, dear. We wouldn't want things to get messy before the board meeting. What board meeting? Oh, she said, her smile widening. Didn't they tell you? The HOA is holding a hearing next week. They're going to decide who the property belongs to. My stomach dropped. A hearing over my own house. The days leading up to that meeting were a blur. I barely ate. I barely slept. Every time I looked out the window, I saw her, sometimes on her porch, sometimes taking pictures again. At night, her lights stayed on late, like she was waiting for something. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best clothes and drove to the clubhouse. The parking lot was already full. Inside, a crowd had gathered, neighbors whispering, glancing at me, avoiding eye contact. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, and next to them, Janet with her lawyer. When the meeting began, the chairperson called the session to order. We're here to discuss the property boundary dispute between Mr. Ethan Thompson and Mrs. Janet Holloway. Janet's lawyer stood up first. He spoke confidently, waving old survey documents like a preacher holding scripture. As you can see, these maps clearly indicate that the original property line extended beyond the current fence. My client's land was incorrectly recorded during a 2005 zoning update. I wanted to object, to yell, but the rules said I had to wait my turn. Then it was my chance. I stood up and held up the certified county records. These are the most recent, legally binding documents. The county verified them 2 days ago. There's no mistake, this is my property. The board members leaned in, flipping through my papers, but their expressions didn't change. Then Richard, the bald man from before, cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, the HOA's internal survey conflicts with these county maps. That's impossible, I shouted. The county maps are the law. The room went silent. Richard sighed. Regardless, until a court ruling determines ownership, the HOA must operate based on its internal records. As of today, those records list Mrs. Holloway as the rightful owner of the disputed parcel. It felt like the floor fell out from under me. Janet turned her head and smiled at me, slow and deliberate. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Everyone was watching. I left the meeting in a daze. Outside, neighbors stood in small groups whispering. No one met my eyes. By the time I got to my car, my hands were trembling so badly I dropped my keys. When I got home, something felt wrong. My mailbox had been ripped out of the ground, the fence gate was open, and there, nailed to my front door, was another HOA notice. Effective immediately, HOA recognizes ownership transfer pending verification. Occupancy to be reviewed. Occupancy. They were talking like I didn't even live there anymore. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, staring at the walls, feeling everything crumble. How could this be happening? How could anyone just take your home? Around midnight, I heard something outside, soft footsteps on the porch. I crept to the window and looked out. Janet was standing there. She wasn't knocking, wasn't holding anything. She was just staring at the door, her face pale in the porch light, her lips moving like she was whispering something to herself. Then she reached out and touched the doorknob. That's when I banged on the glass. "Get off my porch," I shouted. She didn't move at first, then slowly she smiled. "Enjoy your stay while it lasts," she said and walked away. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I found something else, a small envelope slipped under my door, no name on it. Inside, a single piece of paper with one sentence written in neat handwriting. "You don't know what she did in that house before you bought it." I froze. What did that mean? Before I could even process it, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA again. "Due to ongoing ownership disputes, please vacate the property within 14 days pending investigation." 14 days. 14 days to leave the home I legally bought. And that's when I realized this wasn't about property lines anymore. This was personal. Because someone, maybe Janet, maybe the HOA itself, didn't just want my land. They wanted me gone. And deep down, I had the horrible feeling that if I didn't find out why soon, I might never get the chance. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. Not because I was scared of Janet, though maybe I should have been, but because every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. From behind curtains, from parked cars, from across the street where the Holloway's house stood like a watchtower. I started documenting everything. Every notice, every letter, every photo she took. I created a folder on my computer called Proof. It was the only thing keeping me sane, that and the growing conviction that something was deeply wrong here. On the third day, I went back to the county clerk's office to dig deeper. I asked to see every record connected to my property, old deeds, ownership transfers, survey maps, zoning changes. The clerk, an older woman with silver hair and tired eyes, frowned as she scrolled through her screen. "That's strange," she murmured. "There's a gap here." "A gap?" "Yes, between 2004 and 2006, there's no record of ownership for this address. It's as if it disappeared from the database entirely." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean disappeared?" She shrugged. "Sometimes files get corrupted during system migrations, but in a case like this, it's unusual." I leaned closer. "Could someone have deleted it?" She gave me a long look. "Officially no, unofficially anything's possible." I left with copies of everything I could get, but that missing 2-year window haunted me the whole drive home. That night, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. Old maps, property lines, tax forms, and then something caught my eye. On one of the older survey photos dated 2004, there was no house, just an empty plot. But the date didn't make sense. According to county records, the house was built in 2003. How could a 2004 photo show nothing but dirt? I sat there staring at it until after midnight, when a sudden sound outside made me jump. It was faint, like something scraping against wood. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped toward the front door. The noise came again, this time from the side of the house. I peered around the corner, my heart hammering. Someone was there, crouched by my fence. "Hey!" I shouted. The figure jerked up and ran, disappearing into the darkness behind Janet's house. I called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later, took my statement, and left after a half-hearted look around. "Probably kids," the officer said. "These HOA neighborhoods are full of bored teenagers." But I knew it wasn't kids. The next morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the side fence straight to my back door. Whoever it was had been right behind my house. I emailed the HOA again, demanding they remove the dispute sign and stop harassing me. Their reply came that evening. Mr. Thompson, we understand your frustration. However, given the evidence presented by Mrs. Holloway and our independent assessor, our position remains unchanged. We urge you to comply with relocation procedures until ownership is clarified. Relocation procedures. They were treating me like a tenant. I printed their email, added it to my growing proof folder, and decided enough was enough. I needed someone who actually cared, a lawyer of my own. The next morning, I drove downtown and hired an attorney named Lisa Hart. She was sharp, confident, and didn't flinch when I told her everything. They can't evict you based on HOA records alone, she said. Not without a court order. We'll file an injunction immediately. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. But that feeling didn't last long. Because when she pulled the county property file, her expression darkened. Ethan, she said slowly, did you know there was a previous owner listed under your address before the developer sold it to you? Yeah, the realtor mentioned something about that. Why? Well, according to this, that owner was a Holloway. My blood ran cold, as in Janet. Possibly a relative, a man named Robert Holloway, but here's the strange part, he's listed as deceased. Deceased. She nodded, died in 2005, cause of death undetermined. I leaned back, my mind spinning. So her husband owned this house before me. Looks like it, Lisa said, but there's no record of when ownership officially transferred. The documents just stop after his death. That missing gap in the records suddenly made sense. 2 years, 2004 to 2006. Exactly when Robert Holloway died. I drove home in silence, my mind buzzing. When I got there, I noticed something strange, a small crack running along the foundation near the back patio. It hadn't been there before. Out of instinct, I crouched and brushed away the dirt. Beneath the crack, there was something dark like old wood. I fetched a screwdriver and carefully pried at the edge. The soil crumbled, revealing what looked like a small hatch, maybe an old crawlspace door sealed shut long ago. I hesitated, then curiosity got the better of me. After a few minutes of digging, I managed to open it enough to peek inside. A cold smell hit me like damp earth and something metallic. The space was pitch black, maybe 4 feet deep. I aimed my flashlight down and froze. There was something wrapped in plastic. Something long. I scrambled back, heart racing. It couldn't be what I thought it was, it couldn't. But the shape, the way it curved under the plastic, looked unmistakably human. My first instinct was to call the police, but another thought stopped me cold. What if it was Robert Holloway? What if this was why Janet wanted the property back? I backed away from the hatch, shaking. I couldn't think straight. If I called the cops, the HOA would swarm me again and Janet would twist the story however she wanted. Instead, I called Lisa. She didn't answer. I left a message, voice trembling. Lisa, it's Ethan. I found something under my patio. Please call me back as soon as you can. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like someone standing outside. Around 3 a.m. I heard it again, that soft scraping sound, only this time it wasn't outside. It was coming from inside the walls. I froze, staring at the drywall. The noise stopped, then started again, slower, deliberate, like something moving between the studs. I grabbed a hammer from the kitchen drawer and pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing, just silence. Then a whisper. Faint, almost too quiet to hear. Get out. I stumbled backward, dropping the hammer. My mind was playing tricks on me. It had to be. Stress, exhaustion, maybe paranoia. But the whisper had sounded so real, so close, I could almost feel the breath behind it. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. It was Richard, the HOA board member. Behind him stood 2 men in polo shirts. Mr. Thompson, Richard said, we're here to conduct a pre-relocation inspection. Pre-relocation what? I snapped. He gave a rehearsed sigh. It's standard procedure during ownership disputes. We just need to verify the condition of the property before transfer. You're not setting foot in my house without a court order, I said. He smiled faintly. You can refuse, of course, but refusal may be interpreted as non-cooperation under HOA Code 3.7. That could affect your appeal. I stared at him, feeling trapped. Fine, 5 minutes, stay together. They walked through the house, taking notes, whispering to each other. One of them lingered by the back patio right above the hatch. "Interesting foundation work," he said quietly. "Did you add this?" "No," I said, "it was here when I bought the place." He nodded slowly, jotting something down. When they left, I felt like they'd taken something with them, not physically, but something heavier, like part of my privacy had been peeled away. That night, Lisa finally called back. Her voice was tense. "Ethan, listen carefully. I did some digging. Robert Holloway's death certificate was issued by the county, but his body was never recovered. The police report says he went missing in 2005 after an argument with his wife." I went cold. "You're kidding." "No, and here's the thing, Janet filed an insurance claim 6 months later, collected over $500,000. I sat there stunned. "You think she—" "I'm not saying anything yet," Lisa cut in, "but if that's his body under your house, then you're living on a crime scene." The room spun around me. "Lisa, what do I do?" "Don't touch anything, don't tell anyone else. I'll contact a private investigator. Just stay inside and lock your doors." I did as she said, but the longer I sat there, the more the air seemed to thicken. I could feel the house breathing, settling, creaking, whispering. At around midnight, I heard footsteps on the porch again. Not quick or sneaky this time, slow, deliberate. I turned off the lights and peered through the blinds. It was Janet again. She stood there with something in her hand, a piece of paper. Then she slid it under the door and walked away. I waited until she was gone, then picked it up. It was a handwritten note. "Stop digging, you don't know what you're about to find." My hands were shaking. I locked every door and window, grabbed my phone, and tried calling Lisa again. No answer. I barely slept, if I slept at all. By morning, something inside me had shifted. Fear had turned into determination. If she wanted me gone, there had to be a reason. I grabbed my flashlight and went back to the patio. The hatch was still there. I pried it open again, wider this time. The smell was worse, damp and sweet, like rot. I lowered the flashlight. The plastic had torn slightly overnight. Something pale was visible through the rip, bone or maybe wood, I couldn't tell. But there was something else too, a shape near the corner of the crawlspace. A small box. I reached in, careful not to touch the plastic, and pulled it out. It was old metal covered in rust. Inside were several items: a wedding ring, a Polaroid photo, and a folded piece of paper. The photo showed Janet and a man I assumed was Robert, standing in front of my house, smiling. The note, however, was short. It said, "If you're reading this, she found me first." I felt the blood drain from my face. Suddenly, everything made sense: the property dispute, the missing records, the whisper in the wall. Janet wasn't trying to take my house. She was trying to bury it again. But now I had proof, and if I could get it to Lisa before Janet realized what I'd found, maybe I could finally end this nightmare. I closed the hatch, locked every door, and packed the box into my car. I didn't even notice the figure watching from across the street, standing perfectly still behind the curtains of a white house with roses out front. Janet's house. The box sat on the passenger seat beside me as I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. Every red light felt like an eternity, every passing car like a threat. I kept glancing at the box, half expecting it to move. The thought that a dead man might have left that note, that he might still be buried beneath my home, made every breath feel heavy. I called Lisa again, straight to voicemail. I left another message. "Lisa, I found something, a metal box, photos, a note. I think it's Robert Holloway. I'm coming to your office now." Her office was 15 minutes away. I never made it there. Halfway down Oak Ridge Drive, flashing lights filled my rearview mirror. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up behind me, siren blaring. I pulled over. 2 uniformed officers approached. "Mr. Ethan Thompson?" one asked. "Yes." "You need to come with us." "What, why?" "There's been a report of trespassing and destruction of property." I stared at him. "Trespassing? That's my house." He didn't respond. The other officer opened my door. "Step out, sir." My pulse spiked. "At least let me call my lawyer." "You can do that at the station." Before I could argue, they cuffed me, cold metal against my wrists. The box, my proof, sat on the seat as they shut the door. At the station, they took my phone, my wallet, everything. After what felt like hours, a detective walked in, Tall, gray-haired, eyes sharp but tired, his badge read Detective Miller. "Mr. Thompson," he said, sitting across from me, "you've had quite a week." "I didn't trespass," I said, "that house is mine." He tilted his head. "The HOA says otherwise, but that's not why you're here." I frowned. "Then why?" He slid a photo across the table. It was of the crawl space under my patio, the plastic, the dirt, the torn edge. "You want to explain this?" My mouth went dry. "I didn't put that there." "Then who did?" I hesitated. "My neighbor, Janet Holloway. Her husband went missing years ago. I think that's him." The detective's eyes narrowed. "You're saying she buried her husband on your property?" "I'm saying someone did, and she's been trying to cover it up ever since." He leaned back, studying me. "Do you have any evidence?" I had a box with photos, a ring, and a note. "It's in my car." He glanced at the door, then back at me. "We didn't find any box in your car, Mr. Thompson." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "That's impossible, it was right there." He didn't reply. He just stood up and left the room. Hours passed, no one came back. When they finally released me, the sun was already setting. "No charges, pending investigation," they said. When I got home, everything felt off. My front door was slightly open. Inside, the house was dark, silent, the furniture untouched, but something was missing. The papers, the folders, my proof file from the kitchen table gone. Someone had been here. Then I noticed it, a single white envelope lying on the floor near the door. My name, written in neat, familiar handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a short note. "Stop, you're making things worse." No signature, no threat, just that. That night I sat in the dark trying to make sense of it all. The missing records, the fake dispute, the body. It all pointed to one thing: Janet had done something terrible years ago and the HOA was helping her keep it buried. But why? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning I got a call from Lisa. She sounded shaken. "Ethan, listen, I went to the courthouse to pull old HOA filings. You're not going to believe this." "What?" "The HOA president, Richard, he's Janet's brother." My stomach dropped. "You're kidding." "No, different last name, same family. He changed it in 2006, right after Robert's disappearance. And get this, the HOA bought that plot of land during that same year. Technically, they owned your lot for 6 months before selling it to the developer." It all clicked: the missing records, the fabricated dispute, the false ownership. They'd built the lie from the inside. Lisa continued, "Ethan, we're going to need to take this to the police, but we'll need solid proof. That body under your house, that's the key." My mind went back to the crawl space, the hatch, the note, the missing box. "I think they already moved it," I said quietly. "Then we'll find it again. Don't go anywhere tonight. I'll bring an investigator first thing in the morning." I hung up, feeling both relief and dread. Relief that someone finally believed me, dread because deep down I knew Janet wouldn't wait until morning. The night fell heavy and silent. I locked every door, every window. I kept the lights off. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Around midnight I saw movement through the blinds, faint, quick shadows. Then came the noise, the scraping again, only this time it was louder, closer. I grabbed the hammer from earlier and moved toward the back of the house. The sound was coming from the patio. When I stepped outside, the air hit me like ice. The moonlight caught something glinting by the hatch, a shovel. And standing beside it was Janet. She looked different, wild, desperate, her hair tangled, her eyes wide and wet with rage. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She froze, then smiled, that same hollow smile. "Fixing what you broke." "You killed him, didn't you?" I said. "You killed Robert." Her expression didn't change. "He wasn't supposed to leave." I took a step back, heart pounding. "You buried him under my house." She raised the shovel slightly. "It was my house first." For a moment, neither of us moved. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint sound of sirens far away. Then she lunged. I ducked instinctively, the shovel whistling past my head. It slammed into the patio, sending splinters flying. I pushed her back, grabbed the edge of the shovel and yanked. We both stumbled. She screamed, a raw, animal sound. In the struggle, the hatch door cracked open. The smell of decay poured out. Janet froze, staring into the darkness below. "He's still there," I said. "You didn't hide it well enough." Tears filled her eyes. "He deserved it," she whispered. "He was going to leave me, take everything. I couldn't let him." Before I could react, she dropped the shovel and bolted into the night. The sirens grew louder, closer now. Maybe a neighbor had called, maybe Lisa had sent someone. I didn't move, I just stood there staring at the open hatch, the darkness breathing beneath it. By the time the police arrived, Janet was gone. They taped off the area, called for forensics, and within an hour a detective confirmed it. There were human remains beneath the patio. It took 2 more hours for them to dig everything out. A skeleton, a wallet, and a gold ring engraved with the initials RH. The next morning, the headlines spread across town. Local HOA leader's sister under investigation after remains found. They arrested Janet later that day. But somehow it didn't feel like victory. Because when I got home that night, the house felt different, colder. The whispers were gone, but the air still carried something heavy, something unfinished. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about that note in the box. The words wouldn't leave my mind. "If you're reading this, she found me first." What did he mean by first? I sat up, staring at the dark corner of the room, and realized something that made my skin crawl. There might have been someone else. Someone she hadn't found yet. The next morning, the sound of footsteps on my porch pulled me out of my restless sleep. I opened the door, and there they were, 2 sheriff's deputies and an older man in a gray suit. His voice was calm but heavy with authority. He said he was from the county recorder's office and needed to speak with both me and the Hendersons. We all stood in that front yard, the place that had become a war zone for weeks. The official unfolded a file and said, "We found the original property transfer documents from 1998. It clearly shows ownership under your name, Mr. Walker." The Hendersons' claim was based on falsified copies. Their faces went pale. Mary started shouting that it couldn't be true, that the HOA had confirmed their ownership. But the official continued, "The HOA had no legal right to interfere with property ownership, and your documents were digitally altered." I watched as the deputies escorted the Hendersons to their car. No handcuffs, no shouting, just silence. A quiet, cold silence that felt heavier than any anger I'd felt before. When their car pulled away, I stood in front of my house for a long time. The yard looked like a battlefield, trampled grass, torn papers, and the faint outline of a "for sale" sign that had been planted there by mistake. I picked it up and threw it into the trash. But victory didn't feel like joy. It felt empty, because what I'd lost during those weeks wasn't just peace or privacy, it was trust. Trust in neighbors, trust in a community I thought would protect its members, not destroy them. A few days later, the HOA called for an emergency meeting. The president, Mr. Turner, stood up in front of everyone, nervously adjusting his tie. He apologized to me publicly, admitting that the board had acted without verifying the documents. He said they dissolved the current leadership and that a new election would take place. The audience clapped, but I didn't, because an apology doesn't rebuild a reputation. It doesn't erase the looks I got from people who once waved from their driveways but now avoided my eyes. Weeks passed, the Hendersons never came back. Their house went dark, and after a while a "for rent" sign appeared. Rumor had it they'd left the state. I wanted to move on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about it all was still wrong. One night, while sorting through old mail, I found an envelope that had been tucked under my welcome mat. Inside was a handwritten note. No name, just words that sent a chill down my spine. "They weren't after your house, they were after what's beneath it." I read it again and again, confused and uneasy. Beneath it, what did that even mean? The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I went to the basement, something I hadn't done in months. The light flickered as I descended and the air was damp. I noticed something strange near the far wall, faint markings, like someone had recently moved a few boxes aside. I knelt down and saw a patch of concrete that looked newer than the rest. I tapped it hollow. My heart began to race. I grabbed a hammer and carefully chipped away at the edge. The concrete cracked open, revealing a small, rusted metal box underneath. Inside were old papers, deeds, maps, and a few black and white photographs. One of them showed my house, but not as it looked now. It was decades older, with a different number on the mailbox and a different family standing in front. At the bottom was a faded letter signed by someone named Lydia Henderson, the same last name as my neighbors. The letter said, "If anyone ever finds this, know that this house holds a part of our family's story. We lost it once to greed, and maybe one day someone will try to take it again." My hands shook. Was it possible that my neighbors, the modern-day Hendersons, were descendants of that same family? Did they think reclaiming the house was some twisted form of justice? I didn't know, and maybe I didn't want to. But as I looked around that quiet basement, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe this wasn't just about ownership or land. Maybe it was about the ghosts of the past that never really go away, only change faces, waiting for their turn to come back. I sealed the box again and left it where I found it. Some stories, I realized, are meant to stay buried. The HOA later sent me a written letter of reinstatement, an official statement clearing my name. But by then, I had already decided to sell the house. Not because I was afraid, but because it no longer felt like mine. Too many eyes had watched me suffer inside those walls. Too many secrets had been dug up from beneath them. When I handed over the keys to the new owners, I didn't tell them about the box, or the note, or the Hendersons. I just smiled and said, "It's a peaceful neighborhood." As I drove away, I glanced at the house one last time in my rearview mirror. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the porch, the same place where everything began. It looked peaceful again, ordinary. But I knew better. Because sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from strangers, they come from the people who live right next door. And sometimes, even when you win, the house never really feels like home again.